What's going on, money makers? It's T Web. Y'all already know how that go. As y'all can see, we in the trap with it. We in my room this time, and I'm just gonna be talking about Julia K. Walker's chapter two. You know what I'm saying? Give y'all a brief rundown, kind of give y'all the most important points, so y'all don't have to go read the whole chapter yourselves, and just give y'all basically a quick little overview of the foundation of black businesses, black entrepreneurship. My name is Terrell Webster, aka Swaggerelli, aka Relly Rail, aka Rail, aka T Web, sophomore, kinesiology major from Washington, D.C., and I'll be presenting chapter one of the history of black business in America by Dr. Juliet E.K. Walker. As you guys go through these slides and watch this video, there's some key components to chapter one that I want you guys to pay close attention to and kind of pull information out about. These include the pre-colonial African markets, trading organizations, craft and merchant guilds, African cooperative work ethic, women in production and trade, taxation and exchange media, African commercial culture and ethics, debunking the stolen people myth, the transatlantic slave trade, marketing African occupational expertise in colonial America, colonial African American slave provision grounds, colonial African slave trading and marketing activities, and slave property ownership. Make sure you guys look out for those key components, those key elements to chapter one. The trading markets was crucial in Western African culture. In general, African trading networks covered large parts of the continent. They had about populations from 5,000 to 2,000 people with trade markets all throughout. They also had trade markets internationally. They had them regionally and locally. The Ghana Empire was actually one of the first powerful West African empires. It controlled the trade and salt. It controlled the trade in gold and salt between the Sahara and the Sudan, becoming very wealthy and powerful. The empire's control over these resources allowed it to dominate the trans-Saharan trade routes. Now, the trans-Saharan trade was critical to the rise of the great Western African empires and the incorporation of African economies into the global trading system. It connected West Africa to North Africa and beyond, facilitating the exchange of goods such as salt, gold, textiles, and other commodities. Women were also important in trade. The roles in the markets were actually very important, as they were primary traders, they were market operators, they controlled agriculture, products, textiles, and other goods. So they were just as important as men. Another important empire was the Asante Empire, which replaced the Akan, using a intimidating approach. They had guards protecting these goods. They had guards protecting the roads and common areas and things of that nature. Another impactful aspect in the Western African culture was slavery. Um, slavery is slavery, but in some aspects, slaves were allowed to keep money and profits from surplus. They were allowed to have properties and things of that nature. Of course, slave owners had the final say, but sometimes allowing slaves to make money and have properties were beneficial to the slave owners. A big part of the slavery was the transatlantic slave trade, which was a cornerstone of the global economy. Um, it involved basically black Africans to move to America, where they were sold into slavery. The slave trade generated wealth for European traders in American colonies, particularly in places where slave labor was integral to the production of cash crops, tobacco, sugar, and cotton. You know, I mean, on the other hand, the slave trade disrupted African American economies. It depopulated regions and fostered internal conflicts. So, I mean, and then they had something called slave provision grounds, which were small plots of land allocated by slave owners to enslave Africans in the American colonies. These grounds they were significant as they allowed African enslaved Africans to engage in trade. Um, they allowed these slaves to cultivate their own food and occasionally sell extra produce at local markets, so making them entrepreneurs basically. Um, Additionally, the slave trade within American colonies involved both the importation of African slaves and the domestic trade of slaves between plantations and regions. As the colonies expanded, the demand for slave labor grew, which led to a robust of internal slave market. The marketing and sales of slaves were conducted through various means, including like public auctions, private sales, and maybe like even advertisements in newspapers. Black businesses were heavily significant in the development of, you know, African culture, you know what I'm saying, after slavery, especially, or even during slavery, especially as enslaved blacks or Africans who possess specific skills, maybe such as like construction, blacksmith, carpentry, tailoring, many more. They could be hired by their owners to perform work for others. Even though they were considered property, they engaged in economic activities like growing crops, raising livestock, and producing goods that could be sold, in local markets. Some main factors that kind of prevented the uprising of black businesses was, of course, racism and discrimination. Like even when the blacks were free, slave owners would try to pull them back. They would try to do things that make them unsuccessful. You know what I mean? They face widespread discrimination all over. Boycotts, challenges, violence. I mean, enslaved individuals, they were controlled by the owners, so sometimes even the owners took majority of the slaves' money if they felt like it. However, these this West Africans, they had a specific work ethic. You know what I mean? They emphasized collective labor and mutual support within the community. Enslaved Africans and their descendants, they carried this ethic with them. You know what I mean? They worked together in cooperative efforts that was crucial. I mean, it helped maintain community cohesion and economic survival, under the oppressing conditions of slavery. In many African societies, wealth wasn't even seen as something to be like, you know what I'm saying, how it is now, where everybody wants to be rich and everybody wants to be wealthy. It wasn't seen like that. When people had money in Africa, they would use it to help their families, so they would spread it. So this prevented like poverty. This prevented people like not having no jobs, unemployment. The wealth was spread. That's how they developed. You know what I'm saying? That's how they spread because they was together. They worked as a community. They was united. You know what I mean? Uh, but despite the freedom, despite the what would I say, road to success, despite their upbringing, they face severe restrictions. You know what I mean? The discrimination and racism, it limited their business opportunities. They had difficulty accessing credit. You know what I'm saying? Just things that you would need to run a successful business, they didn't have. And this was especially due to, slave owners being petty. Lastly, some miscellaneous information about the West African cultures, you know what I mean, is during the colonial period and into the earlier years, cattle herding was common. It was common activity on the southern plantations. The enslaved Africans were often tasked with tending to cattle, maybe driving herds and managing livestock. Even after the Civil War and the abolition of slavery, many free Africans continued to work in the cattle industry. Ultimately, the role of African Americans in the cattle industry, beginning during the era of slavery, it kind of laid the foundation for the emergence of cowboys as a distinctive group, and that's how, you know what I'm saying, the Cowboys kind of came along. Additionally, to debunking the stolen people myths, kind of, it was, you know what I mean, it highlights that the enslaved Africans were not passive victims but actively resisted their conditions in various ways. You know what I mean? So the resistance that took many forms, maybe including rebellions, escape attempts, work slowdown, sabotage, all those kind of things, just showed their ability to resist and adapt. You know what I'm saying? It demonstrated significant agency and resilience. Lastly, the concept of African survivalisms, it referred to the cultural, social, and economic practices the Africans brought with them to the United States. You know what I mean? So during the transatlantic slave trade, they were adapted to help them survive, resist brutal conditions of slavery. You know what I'm saying? These survivalisms were deeply rooted in these traditions, and it was crucial. You know what I'm saying? It was a crucial. And that's a wrap. That's the end of today's video. Hope y'all as blown away as I am. We in downtown Atlanta with it. Morehouse College, Black Entrepreneurship. Y'all know how we coming, man. Shout out to Professor Crump. Shout out to the world. Downtown Atlanta is great. I love it. Make sure y'all take in this knowledge. Go back and rewatch the video as many times as you need. Stay humble, stay blessed, stay motivated. T-Web out.